She knew the secret that would destroy the company. She had known for months, maybe years, but nobody asked, because nobody knew her name. Until the morning the CEO walked into the room and did something nobody expected. He pointed at her and said, "You're going to sit next to me." In front of the investors, the board, everyone who had never seen her before. What she said that day changed everything. This is the story of an invisible woman. And the moment she was finally seen, there are places where power lives in plain sight. Corner offices, executive floors, conference rooms with views that cost more than most people's homes. And then there are the places where companies actually survive. The back offices, the night shifts, the invisible hours after all the important people have gone home. This is a story about both. About a woman who held an entire empire together from the shadows. And about the moment someone finally looked down and saw her. Marcus Hartwell was never in a hurry. He never had been. The black car stopped at the glass entrance at exactly 7:42 a.m., like clockwork. The security guards knew the timing, the gesture, the exact angle of the wave. Power, real power, doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives. The company was a precision machine. Growth charts always pointing upward. Contracts signed in expensive cafes. Headlines praising vision, courage, disruption. Within the walls, people talked about expansion, market dominance, the future. This was a modern empire, built on cold decisions and perfectly rehearsed presentations. That week, everything orbited around one event, a high-level summit, board members, international investors, potential merger partners. Nothing was casual. The suit, the speech, the calculated smile. One wrong word could cost millions. And Marcus knew that better than anyone. Still, something was different in the air. He walked through the hallways slower than usual, observed more than he spoke, as if searching for something that didn't appear in the reports. Something absent from the endless slides and quarterly reviews. Late that night, as the building emptied floor by floor, lights going out one by one, he was still there, standing, thinking. He had decided something crucial. For this event, showing power wouldn't be enough. He needed to show truth. And that decision would change everything. Claire Bennett arrived when nobody was looking and left the same way. Her name was rarely spoken aloud, and when it was, it came with urgency. Assistant Junior Analyst Support. The title barely mattered. Within the company, she was more function than person. She was always there. Organizing files, correcting errors that weren't hers, saving projects minutes before collapse. She knew the system shortcuts, the manager's moods, the problems that never reached the executive floor. She saw everything, heard everything, but was never invited to speak. In meetings, she sat near the wall, notebook in her lap, pen steady, gaze attentive. She wrote down decisions she already knew would fail, swallowed comments that could prevent weeks of rework. She learned early, in that place, silence meant survival. After everyone left, she stayed, adjusting details, erasing whiteboards, collecting coffee cups forgotten on the glass table. The building changed its sound at that hour. Emptier, more honest. And it was there that the company showed its true face. She knew that place like someone knows an old house, where it creaked, where it leaked, where it seemed solid but wasn't. She just didn't imagine that someone at the top was beginning to see those same cracks, much less that he was looking exactly at her. Claire wasn't born invisible. She learned to be, 6 years ago, in a smaller meeting. She had raised her hand, spoke with clarity, with data, with conviction, suggested a change in the customer service process that could save weeks. The room fell silent, but not the respectful silence that would come later. This was the silence of people waiting for you to realize you'd spoken too much. The manager smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't warm anything, and said, "Interesting, Claire, but I think we'll keep it as is," and moved on. 2 weeks later, a manager presented the same idea, with different words, different slides. He was applauded, promoted 3 months later. She understood the lesson. It wasn't about being right. It was about who had the right to be right. After that, she started writing everything down, kept ideas in notebooks that nobody asked to see, fixed errors before they became crises, but never took credit, learned to disappear into the corners of rooms, to speak only when asked, to be useful without being noticed. It worked. She kept the job, paid the bills, survived. But something inside her was slowly withering. It's not dramatic like a collapse. It's silent. Like a plant losing color because the light never reaches it. She kept a notebook at home. Sometimes late at night, she'd open it and read the old ideas, projects that could have changed entire departments, solutions she never presented, words she never said. And she'd ask herself, at what point did I get used to this? But the answer never came, because accepting invisibility isn't a decision. It's a series of small surrenders that, added together, become a life. And now, after years of being invisible, the CEO was asking for exactly what she had learned never to do: be seen. The problem was that nobody else noticed. Every company has its ghosts, people who hold entire structures together without anyone knowing exactly how. Claire was one of them. When the system crashed at 11 at night, she was the one who fixed it. When an important client threatened to cancel, she was the one who found the error in the contract. When a presentation had contradictory data, which happened frequently, she was the one who, discreetly, sent an email with the corrected version. But the emails never got responses. The corrections were absorbed without acknowledgement. The problems avoided were never officially problems. David Park, an analyst from financing, noticed. He saw Claire arriving early, leaving late, always with the expression of someone carrying invisible weight. Once, he tried to comment to Sarah Chen, the middle manager. Claire saved that project from disaster, did you see? Sarah shrugged. She just did her job, David. That's what we pay her for. But it wasn't just her job. It never was. Claire knew things nobody else knew clients by their first names, remembered details from contracts from 3 years ago, understood the company's machinery, like someone who assembled the machine piece by piece. And nobody asked how. Nobody wondered what would happen if she simply stopped, until Marcus began to realize something was wrong. He had requested a complete operations report. 5 managers took 3 weeks to put it together. When it reached his desk, it was full of inconsistencies. He called Jennifer Hayes, VP of Operations. Who really understands this? Jennifer hesitated. The team worked hard. Marcus, it's complex. I didn't ask who worked hard. I asked who understands. She fell silent. Then, almost without meaning to, there's Claire, from support. She knows all of this by heart. Marcus wrote down the name. And for the first time in years, someone was paying attention. The request came without announcement, without audience, without dramatization. Marcus appeared at her desk at the end of the workday, when the office was already breathing exhaustion. He said her name calmly, like someone making a point to get the pronunciation right. She looked up, surprised, trying to understand if it was really her. He didn't beat around the bush. Claire, I need you to accompany me to next week's event. I need you to present a project. Not the official one, not the polished one, but the real version, the one that only someone who lives the company from the inside can see. She fell silent. The kind of silence that isn't a lack of response. It's an excess of disbelief. Her heart raced before reason caught up. Her hands went cold. For a second, she thought it was a test, or an elegant trap. Nobody had ever asked for her opinion that way, much less the CEO, much less for an event of that size. Why me? She managed to ask. Marcus looked at her with something she didn't expect to see: exhaustion, honesty. Because I've spent 6 years listening to people who speak well, and the company is bleeding in places they don't see. But you see, don't you? She nodded slowly. Then I need you to speak. When the news spread, the looks changed temperature, some curious, others hard. There were smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Whispers interrupted when she passed. Sarah Chen was direct. Be careful, Claire. That stage isn't for those who don't know how to play the game. David Park, on the other hand, found her in the hallway and said quietly, "Finally, someone who knows what they're talking about will get to speak." She accepted, not because she felt ready, but because she knew too much to refuse, and in that instant, without realizing it, she stopped being invisible. Not yet to everyone, but to who really mattered. The preparation for the event began. And with it, the resistance. Sarah Chen called a strategic alignment meeting. Claire was called, but not to present, to support. The message was clear. Marcus may have this idea, but let's make sure the message is appropriate, Sarah said, looking directly at Claire. Jennifer Hayes, the VP, was in the room. She didn't agree, just watched with the neutrality of someone who prefers not to take a position. Claire felt the weight. It wasn't just about the event. It was about years of hierarchy being challenged by an invitation she didn't ask for. In the following days, small sabotages began. Files she needed to access were temporarily unavailable. Preparation meetings were scheduled at times she couldn't attend. Feedback on her presentation draft came vague, contradictory, discouraging. Too technical, not strategic enough. Maybe not the right tone for investors, but they never said what the right tone was. One night, after everyone had left, David found Claire still in the office. She was redoing the presentation for the 4th time, her eyes tired, her posture curved. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice came out low. "I always knew I wasn't seen. But I didn't know that when you are seen, sometimes they try to erase you again." David sat beside her. "Do you know why they're doing this?" She shook her head. "Because you're saying truths they pretended not to see for years. And now, when you speak, it's going to be obvious that they knew and chose to ignore it." Claire looked at the screen, at the words she had written and rewritten, simple truths, real problems. "What if I fail? Have you ever failed?" she thought. In 6 years, how many projects had she saved? How many crises had she avoided? How many times had she held the company together alone, without applause, without recognition? "No," she said more firmly, "then it won't be now." That night she stopped rewriting to please and started writing to be heard. The night before the event, Claire couldn't sleep. She sat in the dark living room of her apartment, the presentation open on her laptop, the screen light reflecting on her tired face. She went through each slide one more time, each phrase, each data point. It wasn't fear of being wrong. It was fear that being right wouldn't be enough. At 2 a.m, her phone vibrated. A message from Marcus. "Tomorrow, I just need you to be honest. Nothing more, nothing less." She reread it 3 times. Then typed back, "What if the honesty is uncomfortable?" The response came quickly, "Especially if it is." Claire closed her laptop, breathed deeply, and for the first time in 6 years, she felt something different from the resignation that accompanied her every day. She felt purpose. The next morning, she put on the most professional outfit she had. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't designer, but it was hers, honest, like everything she was about to say. She looked at herself in the mirror, saw a tired woman, but not defeated. "You know this company better than any of them," she said to herself, and she went. The room was too large for so much restraint. Long table, leather chairs aligned, crystal water glasses untouched. The kind of place where historic decisions are made in low voices. Claire entered beside Marcus, feeling the weight of the carpet under her feet, as if each step was being watched. And it was. The looks arrived before the words. They assessed the outfit, the posture, the place she occupied. Some executives leaned back. Others crossed their arms. Nobody smiled. The silence there wasn't comfort, it was a test, and she felt it. Dr. Richard Thompson, one of the main investors, adjusted his glasses and looked at Marcus with barely disguised curiosity. Sarah Chen was 3 chairs to the left, her face a mask of professional neutrality. Jennifer Hayes leafed through documents without reading. Marcus opened the meeting with his usual calm. Talked about growth, strategy, future vision, but then he did something unexpected. He paused, turned slightly to Claire. Before we continue, I want you to hear a different perspective. Claire Bennett has worked with us for 6 years. She knows our operation in a way that no executive report can capture. And today she's going to share what we need to hear, not what we want to hear. The room became motionless. Dr. Thompson frowned. Sarah Chen swallowed hard, and Claire, for the first time in her professional life, had the absolute attention of a room full of power. The weight was crushing, but she breathed, opened her notebook, and began. "I'm not going to talk about market strategies," Claire began, her voice firm but without arrogance. "I'm going to talk about what happens after you make those strategies." Some looks crossed, but she continued. 3 years ago, we decided to expand our client base by 40%. On paper, it worked. The numbers went up. But nobody asked the support team if we had the capacity to handle that volume. She turned a page in her notebook. We didn't. Calls doubled. Response time tripled. We lost 15% of new clients in the first 6 months. But that didn't appear in the quarterly reports because we classified it as expected turnover. Dr. Thompson leaned forward. Sarah Chen was pale. "Last year," Claire continued, "we launched a new platform, beautiful, modern, functional, except nobody trained the customer service reps to use it. For 4 months, each call took 30% longer because the team had to do everything manually behind the scenes. Our clients didn't know. But our employees were drowning." Jennifer Hayes closed her document folder. Now she was really listening. "And this quarter," Claire said, her voice lower but still firm, "we're chasing an efficiency metric that is, in practice, destroying relationships that took us years to build. We're measuring response speed, not quality, not resolution. Speed." She looked directly at Marcus. "And our best customer service reps, those who actually solve complex problems, are being penalized because they take longer, because doing it right takes time." The silence was absolute. "So when you ask why our client retention is falling, why satisfaction is declining, why we're losing talent, the answer isn't in the reports, it's in the people you never asked." She closed the notebook slowly. "I'm not saying the strategies are bad. I'm saying nobody is listening to what happens when they meet reality." When she finished, there was no applause. There was something rarer, absolute attention, the kind of silence that's born when an entire room understands it just heard something that can no longer be ignored. The silence didn't end when Claire closed her notebook. It spread, dense, uncomfortable. Nobody moved, as if any movement could confirm what everyone was already feeling. "Doctor." Thompson was the first to speak, his voice controlled but sharp. "These are serious accusations, Miss Bennett." "They're not accusations," Claire responded calmly. "They're facts. I have the data, the call records, the emails, the internal reports that never made it up to this floor." Sarah Chen tried to intervene. "Claire, I think you're simplifying processes that are much more complex than—" "I'm not simplifying," Claire interrupted politely. "I'm translating, because the complexity you use to describe these processes is exactly what's hiding the problems." Jennifer Hayes took a deep breath. For the first time, she spoke, "Marcus, did you know about this?" Marcus looked around the table. Then, with brutal honesty, "I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what, because nobody ever told me, and I never asked who really knew." There was a timid throat clearing. A glass of water was finally touched. But nobody had a ready defense, because it wasn't opinion, it was lived experience, and that disarmed any argument trained over years of power. Some faces closed, others leaned forward, as if finally understanding something that had been escaping for months. There were leaders there realizing, too late, that they had never listened to who really sustained the operation, that the comfort of the top had created a dangerous deafness. And it was in that instant, without motivational speech, without theatrical gesture, that Marcus understood. The company's greatest asset had never been in the high positions. It had been invisible all along, and now there was no way to pretend he didn't see it. The change didn't come with fireworks, it came with actions. 3 days after the event, Marcus called a meeting with all the leadership. It wasn't planned, it wasn't on the agenda. He opened simply, "I want a complete mapping of all operational processes, but I don't want it done by consultants. I want it done by those who execute these processes every day, and I want them to have direct voice to me." Jennifer Hayes swallowed hard. Sarah Chen tried to protest. "Marcus, this could create hierarchical disorganization." He looked at her. "Great, because the hierarchical organization we have is hiding the truth. And that's costing us more than disorganization." Claire was called for a short conversation. Direct, without exaggerated promises, Marcus talked about responsibility, not luck, said that seeing was only the first step, acting was mandatory. "You're going to lead the operational restructuring, not as a project manager, as Director of Operational Excellence. And you'll have direct access to me, to the board, and to any resources you need." Claire was silent for a moment. "What if I find more problems than solutions?" "Better, because hidden problems rot. Exposed problems we can solve." The promotion came as a natural consequence, almost discreet, but its weight was immense. The strangest thing wasn't the new position, it was the different silence in the hallways. Now, when she spoke, people listened, not out of fear, out of respect, and that changed everything. Ideas previously ignored began to circulate. Problems stopped being swept under the rug. David Park was promoted to work directly with her. Other analysts, previously invisible, began to be invited to important meetings. Sarah Chen resigned 3 weeks later. There was no drama, just the silent realization that she no longer fit in a company that finally decided to listen. The culture began to shift slowly, like tectonic plates. Less appearance, more listening, less blind hierarchy, more shared responsibility. It wasn't a loud revolution, it was a course correction. And while many were still trying to understand what had changed in that company, Claire knew it wasn't the event, it wasn't the speech. It was the day someone had the courage to look down and finally recognize who had always held everything together. Six months later, the company had a different face. The numbers remained important, but now there were other questions in executive meetings. How does this affect those who execute? Did we ask the team if this is viable? Who really understands this process? Claire led a team of 15 people, all of them, previously invisible, analysts, assistants, coordinators who knew the company from the inside. They mapped everything, redesigned workflows. Eliminated bureaucracies that existed only to justify positions, brought decisions closer to those who had real information. Dr. Thompson, the skeptical investor, came back for a visit, sat with Marcus in private. "What you did here is rare," he said. "I've seen companies trying to change culture for years. You changed it in months. How?" Marcus thought. "I stopped pretending I understood everything." Anne started listening to those who really understood. Thompson nodded slowly. "Most CEOs can't do that. The ego won't let them. Then their ego is worth more than the company. Mine isn't." Claire still worked late, but now she wasn't alone. David was there. Other analysts too. Not because they were obligated, but because, for the first time, they felt their work truly mattered. On one of those nights, David asked, "Did you imagine you'd get here?" Claire smiled tiredly. "I didn't even imagine here existed. I just wanted someone to listen." "And now?" She looked out the window. The building still had lights on several floors, people working, building, sustaining. "Now I want to make sure nobody else has to wait 6 years to be heard." Claire's talent never asked for a stage, never demanded a microphone. It grew in the interval between tasks, in errors corrected without credit, in solutions delivered before the problem even came. While others learned to speak beautifully, she learned to sustain. The company didn't change because someone was promoted. It changed because someone was heard, because, for one rare instant, power stopped talking and decided to listen, and that requires more courage than commanding. Not all value comes with a title. Not all intelligence occupies a glass-walled office. Sometimes it passes through the hallways after everyone has gone home, turning off lights, saving systems, holding entire structures together alone. The mistake was never her being invisible. The mistake was the system having learned not to look, to normalize the silence of those who do too much and appear too little. Because the truth is simple and uncomfortable. Talent doesn't shout. It works in silence until someone has the courage to listen. How many people sustain entire systems without ever being seen? How many ideas die silently because they come from those who don't have a high enough position to be heard? Maybe the real failure isn't making strategic mistakes. Maybe it's ignoring those who know the truth before it becomes a loss. If this story made you think of someone or of yourself, maybe it's time to listen more carefully. Or to speak, even with your voice trembling, because some stories don't start at the top, they start in silence. And if you believe that talent deserves to be seen, recognized, and respected, stick around. Subscribe to the Life Transformed channel. The next story might be even closer to your reality than you imagine.